and I'm very happy to be here and present this work, which is mortality risk information and health-seeking behavior during an epidemic. And while I am the lead author on this, I can't, thank my co-authors enough for actually implementing this intervention in 2017. Obviously, this work couldn't have been done without them doing this back 5-6 years ago. So very appreciative to all of them. So I'll just set this up with the context that I'll be discussing today for this paper, which is in Malawi. And in Malawi, we have a study called the Malawi Longitudinal Study of Families and Health, and we call it the MLSFH. And back in 2012, there was a cohort of the larger sample that was established to study the older individuals in the MLSFH and their aging patterns. And there was also recognition of the fact that there was pessimistic survival expectations within the population in Malawi. And this was mostly due to the fact that the country was pretty devastated by the HIV epidemic, where life expectancy dropped pretty dramatically during the years at the height of the HIV epidemic. And therefore, there was a big dip in life expectancy. And then with the rollout of antiretroviral treatment and the availability of this treatment, individuals were lived, the life expectancy of these individuals began to increase again. So overall, these trends rebounded around 2012. However, Malawians still underestimate their survival probabilities or overestimate the likelihood that they'll die in the next 5 or 10 years we show here. 5-year survival probabilities, where for our sample, we can see here that the respondents underestimate their likelihood of survival, the blue line representing the actual life table survival risk for these individuals. So this is over time as well. And just to motivate our paper today, so we have now taken this idea of survival misperceptions and are looking at today after the COVID-19 pandemic. We know that there's that developing policies to effectively prevent disease and prevent infection during health crises, especially unanticipated health crises, is very important. We know that the COVID-19 pandemic was a serious global health shock. Of course, we know this. And during the beginning and throughout the pandemic, there was a rapidly changing epidemiological context where there was different strategies about how to prevent infection and vaccinations. But ultimately, vaccines emerged as the most effective way to stop the spread of the virus. And then we combine this with, again, the perceptions of general mortality risk, which is defined as an individual's subjective assessment of the risk of dying and surviving. And it's important for shaping health behaviors, particularly what we find is in these contexts of health crises. And so, again, mortality risk misperceptions can adversely impact health behaviors. And we saw that these were widespread in Malawi as a result of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. And then in 2017, the MLSFH implemented this information intervention where the target of the intervention was to reduce mortality expectations, both on the individual level and the population survival risk or probability of dying in rural Malawi. And this paper focuses on the 2022 outcomes, specifically COVID-19 vaccine uptake among the 2017 treatment group as compared to the control group, and finds that there is 6 years later or 5 years later, higher vaccine uptake among the treated group. So again, to just give some background here, so Malawi is a small country in southern Africa, and the MLSFH is a sample of rural Malawians. It's a longitudinal study that was started in 1998, and there's since been 12 major survey rounds of data collection, and it was initially established to study fertility and social networks, but this has evolved as the study has gone on and as the different social context and economic contexts have changed. So in 2012, this is when this other cohort, the individuals within the MLSFH that were aged 45 and above, were enrolled in what was called the mature adult cohort, or the MLSFH MAC. And so this was started to study health and cognition at older ages. And 2022 was our 5th round of data collection for the MLSFH MAC, and it included questions about COVID-19. Fittingly. So, and I'll also just note that the MLSFH takes place in 3 regions of Malawi, in the north, the central region, and the south. And we also collected data on other economic health outcomes, expectations not only about population survival and individual survival, but also about COVID-19 as well. And then some more information about the actual intervention itself. So it was a cluster randomized controlled trial meant to correct misperceptions about mortality risk in rural Malawi. And 118 different villages were identified from the existing MLSFH sample, the mature adult sample. And they were ranked based on size of the village, and then each was paired off when one was randomly assigned to the treatment group, while the other was randomly assigned, or was by default the control group. And then the eligibility for being enrolled in the benefits of knowledge intervention, or we call it the BENNO intervention, was to have completed the main 2017 survey that was done in the field, and living in one of the MLSFH villages as well. And so this resulted in a treatment group of 770 individuals and control group 774 individuals in 57 villages each. And the intervention included 2 different parts. It included first video narratives about changing mortality patterns in Malawi, where local actors talked about the benefits of public health campaigns and what the government has done to extend life expectancy in Malawi, both with the HIV/AIDS, with the availability of antiretroviral treatment, but also other nutrition and health programs, as well as providing, you can see this figure on the right, life table sheets in a visual manner, where we provided this information to the respondent of the same gender and same age. It would say, among 10 persons your age and sex alive today, 5 years from today, 1 person, the probability of out of 10 people, the current life tables, the life expectancy says 1 of them would have died, and in 10 years from today, 2.5 to 3, or 2 to 3 people out of the 10 would have died, to provide them with the actual correct survival risk that they face for someone of their same age and gender. And so my co-authors came out with a paper this year to show the BENNO treatment effects for the 1-year follow-up in 2018, and find that there was an increase in population expectations and a reduction in sexual risk-taking. And so we asked the question, did this 2017 health information intervention correct pessimistic mortality perceptions, correcting these perceptions, influence COVID-19 vaccination decisions in 2022? And in fact, we do find that there is a treatment effect on vaccination. And so first, this is just the baseline probability of population, hypothetical individuals who are healthy, HIV positive, sick with AIDS, and with AIDS on ART. So we can see that our respondents are making correct assumptions about the risk of surviving for each of these types of groups, although they are pessimistic. Again, this blue line representing the actual life table probabilities. In panel B, we can see the treatment effect from 2018, that there are higher population survival expectations. And then in panel C, we can see in the 2022 follow-up that 51% of the treatment group versus 43% of the control group was vaccinated. We also have a subsample of maternal siblings who were enrolled in 2021. And for this subsample of respondents, there's even a higher gap between the treatment and control group for the treatment effect on the original respondents. And then for their siblings, we also see spillover effects as well. And I'll just briefly note that in 2021, when we were doing the sibling enrollment, we also asked about vaccination status then, and there was no treatment effect, likely because the availability and access to vaccines at that time was not as widespread. But once COVID-19 vaccines were widely available, then we see this treatment effect in 2022. And overall, we see when we use linear probability regressions to show the likelihood of the treatment group being vaccinated compared to the control group, that there's a 7.5 to 7.6, depending on whether you use covariates treatment effect. So percentage point increase in the likelihood of vaccination for the treatment versus control group. Again, we find that there's also spillover to siblings and to households. So the percentage of the household that's vaccinated versus the number of people that are vaccinated in the household. So for the treated individuals, they have higher family vaccination rates as well. And we overall hypothesize that this is operating both through survival perceptions, which was the initial target, but also a mix of healthcare seeking behaviors and engagement, perceptions of the effectiveness of biomedical treatments and public health guidance, as well as some type of life cycle behaviors where we would perhaps see increases in savings investment and other forward-looking behaviors. And this then in turn affects health behaviors during epidemics, which we measure through vaccination. And I'm running out of time, but we did find overall that there are treatment effects we find that the pathways that did have significant treatment effects were on healthcare utilization. We see a decrease in the use on traditional healers, while an increase in use in hospitals and clinics. We find that there's a differential here on the likelihood, the survival perceptions for those on medicine versus not on medicine for these three groups, only significant for hypertension and diabetes. And so we think that the intervention triggered not only an increase in population survival expectations, but also this engagement with the healthcare system, this belief in the efficacy of treatment that could also just have a reinforcing effect on engagement with the healthcare system that leads to higher vaccinations. So with this paper, we document the long-term impact of this health information intervention designed to reduce misperceptions of survival risk. And we find that there's higher uptake of vaccines in 2022, and that there's spillover effects to other family members, including siblings. And then this type of information interventions could be useful for improving or to increase health-seeking behavior and risk reduction strategies during health crises, especially since this was not anticipated at the time of the intervention. So how individuals in these contexts perceive mortality and respond to health guidance during epidemics, particularly after experiencing something like Malawi did with the HIV epidemic, and kind of a roller coaster of life expectancy changes over time. This could be very important for providing accurate information and increasing health-seeking behavior. So thank you so much.